Have you ever stopped to picture what your later years might hold? Or wondered whether your parents, or even you, will spend retirement enjoying comfort and independence, or instead face challenges like financial strain, isolation, and tension within the family? If those questions feel personal, you're not alone. They resonate with so many of us, and that's exactly why this conversation is so important. In this video, we're diving deep into the real-life journeys of seniors who face these very challenges and found ingenious, heartwarming solutions to live with dignity, joy, and stability, even when finances were tight or independence seemed like a distant dream. These aren't just stories. They're lessons in resilience and creativity that we can all learn from. But that's not all. Stick with us until the end, because we won't just explore where or how to live your later years. We'll also share actionable strategies to lighten the load of caregiving, protect your freedom, and ensure financial stability. From forming unique, mutually beneficial partnerships with neighbors to reimagining your living arrangements, you'll see how a simple shift in perspective can transform your quality of life. And here's the best part. These tips aren't just for seniors. Whether you're in your 20s thinking about your parents' future, in your 40s planning ahead for your retirement, or already navigating the joys and trials of your golden years, these insights can make a difference for anyone who values family, security, and peace of mind. So, if you're ready to uncover practical, uplifting strategies to navigate life's final chapters with confidence and hope, you're in the right place. Let's get started on this journey together. Before we begin, if you haven't already subscribed to the channel, I highly recommend hitting that subscribe button and turning on the notification bell so you never miss out on valuable content like this. Your support helps me continue creating videos that bring wisdom, guidance, and inspiration to my life. And if you find this video helpful, liking and sharing it with your friends and loved ones would mean the world to me. Many older adults initially imagine spending their golden years surrounded by family, living with their children, and enjoying the comfort of familiar faces. But for many, this vision doesn't play out as they expected. Countless seniors abandon the idea of living with their children due to unexpected challenges. For those who consider hiring a caregiver instead, financial stability becomes a significant concern. In the United States, caregivers' monthly wages can range between $3,500 and $5,000, well beyond what many seniors receive through Social Security or pensions. This creates a tough choice for those on fixed incomes. Pay for help or stretch already limited resources. Living in a nursing home poses its challenges. High costs can be prohibitive, with the average cost often exceeding $7,000 per month. Additionally, adjusting to the structured environment of a group living facility isn't easy for those who cherish their independence. In nursing homes, meals and daily routines are regimented, leaving little room for personal freedom. On top of that, conflicts among residents can make the experience even more challenging. For seniors who value autonomy and a personal lifestyle, these issues can feel like an insurmountable compromise. 70-year-old Richard Stevens is someone who explored all three options: living with his children, hiring a caregiver, and moving into a nursing home. Ultimately, he decided none of these paths were right for him. By chance, Richard discovered a unique lifestyle that perfectly suited his needs, one he continues to enjoy today. "I'm 70 years old this year," Richard shares. "I still find great comfort in the memories of my wife, Susan, who passed away at 75 after a long illness. When she was alive, I never worried about retirement. We leaned on each other completely. If one of us got sick, the other stepped in without hesitation. Even hospital visits didn't feel like a burden because we faced everything together. But after Susan passed, my life as an older adult living alone changed completely. Even something as routine as going to the doctor became a daunting task." Richard explains how his search for a sustainable way to live on his own led him to a pivotal realization. "I came to understand that the final chapter of my life is something I have to write myself. When I dragged my aching body to the hospital and waited in those long lines, I'd be completely drained by the time I got home. I do have a son and a daughter, but they're both incredibly busy with their own families and careers. I never wanted to add to their stress by asking them to come to the hospital with me. Deep down, I just didn't want to be a burden. Life has a way of throwing unexpected difficulties at us," Richard reflects. "The more I tried not to lean on my children, the more I realized they were feeling burdened by me. One day, while walking to the grocery store, I misstepped and fell hard, injuring myself severely. The doctor told me I would need at least 6 months of rest. It was a wake-up call I wasn't prepared for. His children, seeing his need for support, suggested that Richard alternate between living with them, 3 months with his son and 3 months with his daughter. Their kindness was thoughtful, but Richard found himself feeling out of place in their homes. A parent's home is always a haven for their children, Richard says. But when you're the parent, a child's home can never truly feel like your own. That truth hit me hard when I stayed with them. Even though I was under their roof, I never could shake the feeling of being a stranger. At mealtimes, Richard would often sit alone, while his children told him to eat in his room. That's when I started to realize how uncomfortable I was for them, he admits. They seemed to see me as a burden, almost as if I were dirty or bothersome because of my age. The hardest part was their cold attitude, especially their sharp tone when they spoke to me. I know I'm old-fashioned, and sometimes my words come out wrong, but when my children were young, I never treated them with anything but warmth, no matter how odd or silly their words were. Richard felt the sting of his children's indifference, something that hadn't been there when he was younger. Now that I'm old, I had to endure their disinterest. I couldn't help but feel like I was being pushed aside, and that hurt more than I care to admit. As soon as I was able to get around again after 6 months, I couldn't wait to return to my own home. That's when I truly understood what people mean when they say, even a run-down shack of your own is better than someone else's grand home. If you are still watching this video and find these lessons useful, please comment 1 below to let me know that you are still here with me. However, Richard's struggles didn't end there. The lingering effects of his injury made simple tasks difficult. Even something as mundane as walking to the nearby store became exhausting, and I'd often break into a cold sweat just from the effort, he shares. I knew I needed help, so I hired a caregiver, paying $4,000 a month. It was more than my pension, so my children had to pitch in to help cover the cost. My finances became increasingly tight, and the weight of it all felt overwhelming. Even with all the challenges, I gradually learned to stand on my own, Richard recalls. My meals have always been simple. Nothing fancy. A feast was something I could only dream about. For me, the principle was straightforward. If I'm full, that's enough. I couldn't afford to spend much on food, and this lifestyle of simplicity became a challenge for the caregivers I hired. While other families might prepare elaborate meals to make caregivers feel appreciated, my meals were frugal. It wasn't uncommon for a caregiver to leave after just a few days, frustrated and complaining that my food was nothing but rabbit food. Richard's struggle to retain help worsened. The agencies began hesitating to send caregivers to my home. They would shake their heads with regret and tell me honestly, Mr. Stevens, nobody will stay long under these conditions. I understood their position, but it left me feeling more isolated and vulnerable than ever. Eventually, Richard's son intervened and found a solution, a nursing home that was relatively inexpensive, though far from ideal. It lacked the amenities many people might expect, but it was the only place my modest pension could afford. I thought entering the home would ease the financial burden on my children, and for a moment, I felt a bit more secure, Richard explains. However, the experience of living in the nursing home quickly proved to be a poor fit for him. The regimented, almost military-style routine clashed with my free spirit. Every part of my day, from when I ate to when I slept, was dictated by a schedule. I felt trapped by the rules of group living, and it wasn't long before I realized this wasn't the life I wanted. After just a month, I decided to leave and return to my own home. Back at home, Richard began to adapt again, though his injury continued to limit him. Fortunately, new technology made life slightly easier. Online grocery shopping had just started becoming more common. I asked my daughter to help me place orders, and every day I would pick up my groceries from a small market near my apartment building's entrance. It was a short walk, so I didn't have to strain my legs as much, and the pain I'd often feel from longer walks became more manageable. It was at that small market that Richard found an unexpected source of kindness. The young couple who ran the store were always friendly. They noticed when I struggled to carry my groceries and would help me take them to the elevator. Over time, I got to know them better, and a small warmth grew between us. It was a quiet comfort I hadn't felt in a long time. For the next 6 months, Richard's life continued in this steady rhythm. I was managing well enough, he says, but there was always an underlying sense of anxiety. As we age, we inevitably grow weaker, and I knew that one day I might not be able to live independently. That thought lingered in my mind like a dark cloud. Even though I was getting by, the uncertainty of my future weighed heavily on me. Richard recalls a day that would unexpectedly change the course of his later years. One afternoon, as I went to pick up my groceries from the small market near my apartment, I saw the young couple who owned the store having a heated argument. It was clear that they were deeply upset. I didn't mean to eavesdrop, but their voices carried, and I couldn't help but overhear the reason behind their quarrel. The wife had bought their daughter a durian, a rare and expensive treat, despite their tight budget. Her husband scolded her, frustrated that she had spent money they didn't have. She explained softly that their daughter had been asking for one for weeks, and she just wanted to give her a little joy. But the husband, his voice trembling with worry, pointed out that their budget couldn't handle such indulgences. If they kept spending carelessly, he warned, they might struggle to afford their daughter's school fees. The tension between their desire to provide and their financial reality struck a chord with Richard. Standing there, watching their argument, I realized something profound, Richard shares. Even people who share the burdens of life, the same household, the same struggles, can't escape conflict and pain. In their worried faces, I saw a reflection of my past when my wife, Susan, and I had to stretch every dollar to make ends meet. It reminded me how hard it is to balance love and practicality when resources are scarce. But as Richard listened, an idea began to form in his mind, one that could potentially help the couple and provide him with the support he desperately needed. Gathering his courage, he carefully approached them. "I have a proposal that might work for all of us," he began. "If you're willing to come by my home for a short time each day, help with laundry, tidy up a bit, and prepare 2 meals, I'll pay you $400 a month. I don't eat much, just 2 simple meals a day, and I don't need anything fancy. This won't take up too much of your time." At first, the couple hesitated. They exchanged unsure glances, clearly feeling awkward about accepting money from a neighbor. "We're just neighbors," the wife said hesitantly. "It might feel strange to charge you for something like that." But Richard gently insisted, explaining how much it would mean to him. Eventually, they agreed, their expressions softening with gratitude. "They looked at me as if I were doing them a great favor," Richard says. "But the truth was, this arrangement made perfect sense for me too. It was far more affordable than hiring a professional caregiver or moving to a nursing home. For just $400 a month, I could get the help I needed without breaking the bank." The arrangement worked beautifully. Every day, the couple came by to prepare 2 simple but hearty meals, clean up around the apartment, and ensure that Richard's home stayed tidy and comfortable. "Since I live alone, there wasn't much housework to do, so it never became a burden for them," Richard notes. "They worked with such care and dedication, and the warmth they brought into my home was something I hadn't felt in a long time." The young couple embraced the opportunity to earn extra income, and their diligence and care quickly brought stability to Richard's life. They were so happy to have a little extra money to ease their financial struggles, Richard shares, and their enthusiasm showed in the way they worked. Over a year, this arrangement became not only practical but genuinely enjoyable for all of us. "I never imagined I could feel so satisfied in my later years without a professional caregiver or a nursing home." The modest costs made the arrangement sustainable for Richard. "I spent about $150 a month on food and an additional modest fee for their help, which was manageable within my budget. It wasn't extravagant, but it was more than enough for me. Their heartfelt support filled me with gratitude and joy every day." As their connection deepened, Richard wanted to show his appreciation. "I promised them a bonus of $4,000 if they continued to care for me long term." For them, that amount was significant, a life-changing event. They were incredibly thankful and started referring to me as a kind-hearted senior. Their gratitude made them even more dedicated to helping me, and the bond we formed brought a unique warmth to my home. The arrangement wasn't just about financial exchange. It was about creating a sense of community and purpose. Thanks to the young couple's help, Richard's later years became stable, peaceful, and far less lonely than he had feared. Reflecting on his journey, Richard offers a profound insight. In the journey of life, there isn't a single right way to live in old age. What works for one person might not work for another. The key is to find what aligns with your circumstances and needs. If you're not satisfied with your current situation, it's important to have the courage to explore new possibilities. Sometimes, even the smallest decision can lead to the biggest change. He continues with a perspective shaped by experience. As the saying goes, all roads lead to Rome. There's no one-size-fits-all model for retirement or aging gracefully. Your later years can be as unique and diverse as you are. It's about creating a life that prioritizes convenience, comfort, and joy, whatever those mean to you. Richard closes with a message of hope. You don't need a fortune to have a warm and fulfilling retirement. What matters most is having the heart to do good, embrace creativity, and build a life that works for you. I hope my story inspires you to think outside the box and prepare for your later years in a way that brings you peace and happiness. Richard transitions to another poignant story, one that underscores the challenges and possibilities of old age. The next story is about 80-year-old John Miller, he begins. John lost his ability to live independently and faced severe financial hardship. Yet, despite these obstacles, he discovered a way to make his final years meaningful and peaceful. Richard pauses thoughtfully before continuing. For so many people, the loss of independence ranks as the greatest fear of growing older. When you need someone else's help just to get through the day, it's easy to feel like your life has lost its meaning. That sense of being a burden, of no longer having control, can cut deeper than any physical ailment. This fear is particularly pressing for seniors with limited finances. For those who are well off, Richard explains, there's often access to professional medical care, in-home support, or assisted living facilities. These resources allow for a more stable and comfortable old age. But for those without substantial means, the idea of a peaceful retirement can seem impossible. That was John's situation. But he found a way to create warmth and fulfillment in his final days, proving that even without wealth, there's hope for dignity and joy in old age. Richard delves into John's story, revealing its deeply personal layers. John turned 80 not long ago. His wife, Emily, passed away 3 years earlier after a long illness. They had been together for decades, sharing both life's joys and hardships. Her death left him not only alone but deeply grieving. Since then, he's had no one to rely on but himself. John has one daughter, Rachel, but her life has been fraught with difficulties. Rachel married a man who turned out to be unreliable. He barely earns enough to support their household and has a troubling history of being verbally and even physically abusive. This has left Rachel in a precarious position. She can't easily leave him, and her struggles make it impossible for her to care for her father. She spent her entire adult life caught in a cycle of sacrifice and hardship. Richard takes a moment, allowing the weight of John's situation to settle in. In sharing John's story, I hope to highlight something important. Old age is inevitable, but how we fill that time is ultimately up to us. Even when the circumstances seem dire, small steps, courage, and creative thinking can lead to unexpected sources of hope. He smiles, adding, John's decisions in the face of his challenges didn't just change his life, they lit up the last chapter of his journey. His story is a testament to the fact that while aging comes with its share of difficulties, it's also a time of profound opportunities for growth, connection, and meaning. John Miller continues his story with a deep sense of pain and helplessness. My daughter Rachel is now in her early 50s, but she's never had a day to herself. She has spent her entire adult life sacrificing for her husband and son. Every moment outside her demanding job is dedicated to cooking, cleaning, and making sure their household runs smoothly. Her husband, David, doesn't make it any easier. He never offers her a kind word, let alone support or appreciation. Despite everything, Rachel can't bring herself to leave him. Her circumstances simply won't allow it. John's voice trembles as he describes the darker side of Rachel's life. David is a man of few skills, but he's very good at dominating her. Anytime she so much as mentions the idea of divorce, he becomes violent, terrifying her into silence. He knows full well no one at home can stand up to him. Just me, a powerless old man. He uses that knowledge to maintain control, and it breaks my heart to see her trapped like this. If you are still watching this video and find these lessons useful, please comment 2 below to let me know that you are still here with me. Rachel's son, Matthew, is now in his 20s, but he too bears the scars of their difficult home life. Matthew grew up witnessing his father's violent behavior. That kind of environment leaves its mark on a person, John reflects. Now, even though he's an adult, he's afraid to stand up for his mother. I know he loves her, but the fear runs too deep. John sighs, his voice heavy with grief. Rachel's life is so precarious that she can't even protect herself, let alone take care of me. She's stretched thin in every way imaginable. When my wife, Emily, was alive, she and I leaned on each other to get through the day-to-day challenges. But since she passed, I've had to face everything on my own. That loneliness, coupled with my declining health, has been almost unbearable. John's health took a sharp turn for the worse last year when he suffered a debilitating stroke. After months of intensive rehabilitation, I regained some mobility, but I lost all sensation on the right side of my body. The doctors told me I'd never fully recover, and that realization threw me into a deep despair. I spent hours lamenting my fate, mourning not just my independence but also the life I once had. With his health failing and his family unable to provide the support he needed, John found himself in a precarious position. My small monthly pension barely covers my basic needs, and my savings are almost gone. I don't have enough money for a secure retirement, let alone for the professional care I now require. After I was discharged from the hospital, my grandson, Matthew, came to pick me up. Rachel, as much as she wanted to, couldn't take care of me. She was already overwhelmed by the demands of her husband and son. Rachel's situation forced her to make sacrifices even at work. She eventually had to quit her job, not because she wanted to, but because her husband demanded more of her time at home. Even then, she could barely manage the household, leaving her with no energy or capacity to look after me. As much as it hurt, I knew I couldn't depend on her. Back at home, I managed the best I could, relying on food deliveries, John continues. I didn't know how to order online myself, so my grandson, Matthew, would handle it for me. Each time, I'd transfer him $10 as payment for the order. To make things easier for the delivery drivers, I kept my front door unlocked. They would walk right in, set the food down, and leave without a word. It wasn't the most secure arrangement, but it worked for a time. Matthew, despite his limited availability, did what he could to help. He'd come by occasionally to help me with things I couldn't manage on my own, like bathing, cleaning the bathroom, or taking out the trash. I appreciated every bit of it, but as time passed, I noticed a change in him. He started to grow frustrated. One day, he finally opened up about it. He told me his girlfriend was unhappy because he never had enough time for her. I could see the strain in his face. He was a young man in his 20s, supposed to be enjoying life, spending time with friends, and thinking about marriage. Instead, he was balancing my care with his future. John knew Matthew's complaints weren't just selfish whining. They were a silent cry for relief, a way of saying the weight of responsibility was too much for him. I couldn't ignore that. As much as I wanted to keep leaning on him, I realized I was holding him back from living his life. After some soul-searching, John came to a difficult conclusion. I couldn't hold on to him any longer. Once he got married, he'd have even less time to care for me. I needed to figure out a more realistic plan for my situation. But it wasn't easy. My greatest challenge was money. My small pension and nearly non-existent savings left me with very few options. He describes the financial barriers that made finding a solution so daunting. A nursing home would cost thousands of dollars a month, far beyond what I could afford. And hiring a live-in caregiver was even more expensive. It felt like every door was closed to me. Still, John refused to give up. I agonized over it for what felt like forever, turning the problem over and over in my mind. Then, finally, I came up with an idea. It wasn't perfect, but it fit my situation. For the first time in months, I felt a sense of calm. I slept soundly that night, knowing I had a plan. The next morning, John didn't waste any time. It was a Saturday, so I called Matthew first thing and asked him to come by. He arrived quickly, probably worried that something had happened. I had him sit beside my bed, and I laid out my thoughts as clearly as I could. I needed his help to make a decision, and I offered him two choices. John looked at his grandson, Matthew, and laid out the two options he had carefully considered. The first option, he explained, was to sell my home and use that money to move into a nursing home, where I would spend the rest of my life. It would mean letting go of everything familiar, but it might provide the care I need. The second option was to transfer ownership of the house to you. In return, you'd live here with me, even after you get married and have children, so we'd all stay under the same roof. To make things easier, I'd also use my small savings to renovate or furnish the house. John paused, giving Matthew time to process the weight of the proposal. I don't expect you to become my caregiver, he continued. I know how unrealistic that would be. Even one's children struggle to care for a chronically ill parent long-term. For a grandchild, someone from a different generation, it's an even bigger ask. I've already thought about that. Instead, John outlined his practical plan. I would hire a part-time caregiver to handle the tasks I can't manage, like cooking and cleaning. That would only cost a few $100s a month, which I can afford. My main reason for wanting to live together isn't about care, it's about security. For someone my age, the scariest thought is having a medical emergency while alone, unable to call for help. Matthew listened intently, nodding as John continued. Living with you would give me peace of mind, and I know it would be a relief for you too. You've told me how hard it is to live with your father's temper. This could be a fresh start for both of us. My house is plenty spacious, 3 bedrooms and 2 bathrooms. Even if you get married and have a family, there will be enough room for everyone. To John's relief, Matthew readily agreed. He looked almost as if a weight had been lifted off his shoulders, John recalls. I think he was relieved to have a solution that worked for both of us. If you are still watching this video and find these lessons useful, please comment 3 below to let me know that you are still here with me. Putting the plan into action. The very next day, Matthew got to work. He contacted a local agency and brought a part-time caregiver to meet John. She started the following morning, John explains. She arrives at 9 a.m. each day to tidy up the house, do my laundry, and prepare lunch before leaving. Then she comes back at 5 p.m. to cook dinner. While I eat, she cleans the kitchen, does the dishes, and heads home for the night. The arrangement was simple but effective, striking a balance between John's need for assistance and his desire for independence. It was just what I needed, he says. The caregiver took care of the daily tasks I couldn't manage, and Matthew didn't have to bear the brunt of my care. For the first time in a long while, I felt a sense of stability. Now, my grandson Matthew and I live together in the house. John shares with a sense of peace. We're slowly renovating it to make it more comfortable, not just for me but for the life he envisions with his future spouse. The caregiver handles my personal care and household tasks, so it doesn't inconvenience Matthew or put pressure on his plans for the future. This arrangement works for everyone, and I can honestly say I feel deeply satisfied with how things have turned out. John reflects on how his carefully thought-out plan has given him the stability he longed for. It worked even better than I hoped, he says. I spend a relatively small amount each month, I'm comfortable in my old age, and I'm even able to save a little of my pension. That sense of financial breathing room is invaluable. It keeps the worry at bay. The importance of planning ahead. John's story offers a powerful lesson about the importance of planning and adaptability. I'm convinced that if we actively seek solutions, even seniors without significant financial resources can find a way to live their retirement years with dignity and comfort. It might take creativity and persistence, but there's almost always a path forward. He touches on a universal desire shared by so many older adults. Most people want to live out their later years comfortably, with as little suffering as possible, and pass away peacefully when the time comes. But the reality is, life doesn't always make that easy. Human nature is fundamentally practical and self-interested. Even the strongest family bonds can falter when stress and financial pressure come into play. That's why it's so important for seniors to have a contingency plan, something that ensures they won't face unnecessary hardship, no matter what. The value of an emergency fund. John emphasizes the importance of financial preparation, even if it's modest. Whether or not your children are devoted and loving, older adults need an emergency fund. It doesn't have to be a huge amount, just something to fall back on in a crisis. I like to think of it as a small lamp that lights the way when everything else feels dark. It's a lifeline that can make all the difference. He concludes with a practical observation. Eventually, everyone comes to realize that even family ties need financial support. Love and care are essential, but in many cases, a single bank transfer can solve most problems faster than 1,000 words. Having that little bit of financial security gives both you and your family the freedom to navigate life's challenges without unnecessary strain. As we come to the end of these heartfelt stories, It's clear that aging is a journey filled with challenges, opportunities, and lessons. Whether it's finding creative solutions to financial struggles, building meaningful connections, or planning to ensure a sense of security, there's so much wisdom we can take from the experiences of others. What about you? What have you learned from these stories? Is there one piece of advice or insight that stood out to you? Something you feel inspired to apply in your own life or share with a loved one? Let us know in the comments below. Your reflections and experiences can inspire others and create a supportive community where we all learn from one another. And of course, if you found this video valuable, don't forget to show your support. Like, share, and subscribe to our channel to help us continue creating meaningful content that empowers people to live with dignity, joy, and purpose in every stage of life. Thank you for watching, and we'll see you in the next video.